Hey, how you guys doing? Eugene Johnson, founder of Make Your Mind an Asset. Super excited. We've got another interview for you, and we've getting a ton of love for our interviews that we're doing with great entrepreneurs and great executives. In this interview, we have a top executive. One of the top executives over at Cisco runs the entire cloud networking division out in San Francisco. Incredible gentleman. Literally, he's helped startup after startup grow, get sold, move on into acquisition. So this gentleman has a wealth of wisdom, a wealth of understanding, a good friend of mine, and somebody that you're going to learn a tremendous amount even in this short interview. So I'm super excited that we had an opportunity to have him, and I hope you guys are going to enjoy. Matter of fact, I know you're going to enjoy. He dropped some amazing information, so be prepared to hear from none other than good friend of mine, a top executive in the corporate America world, Mr. Todd Nightingale. Hey Todd, how you doing?
How's it going?
Awesome, awesome. Pleasure to have you here. Some of you guys know we've been talking about having this event or this interview for a while now, so I'm excited to make it happen. You're here listening to one of my friends, incredible individual, Mr. Todd Nightingale. So want to kind of talk to you about your story and how you've created success and you know some of the things that you know about life and business and everything. So we're gonna talk a little bit about everything. So now you've been in technology for 15, 20 years, something like that. So tell me about how that started. You're in New York, you moved to Boston, and now you're in San Francisco. So kind of like, how did that transition happen and you getting into technology?
Sure. I went to school at MIT. I actually when I went, I thought I might be a physicist or an engineer, and I was drawn to this idea of building things, of making something, whether it be mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, computer science, software engineering, and so I transitioned away from physics. Then I did mechanical engineering and electrical engineering together for a while, and then eventually wound up really in software engineering and electrical engineering at school, and that sort of led me on the path. I was very lucky, I was probably 19 by the time I had sort of made that kind of course correction and focused on software engineering, electrical engineering. As far as getting into kind of networking and IT, it was really all about education. I was lucky enough to be somewhere with tons of research going on. I got to do a research post at what's called the MIT Media Lab.
Nice.
It cranks out some crazy, hyper modern concepts, and then also a lab for computer science, which is now called sales. And it was, I'm just really blessed to have gotten that education and the exposure to that super early.
Nice.
Something about connecting machines and connecting people always fascinated me. The internet itself always fascinated me. I was a guy who had Prodigy account back in the day and a dial-up modem when I was 9. And, something about that has always fascinated me. The idea that you can make that type of communication work and you can reach so many more people. And so that drove me, I think, in large part to focus on that stuff. And my whole career kind of launched from that academic experience.
Nice. So what I love about that is just like when you look at like CEOs, like the CEO from Dropbox and Airbnb or all of these different CEOs, a lot of times they have that similar story, like 9, 10, they started coding or doing something in that area and then kind of took off from there. So what led you to San Francisco?
Funny enough, I had a startup out in Atlanta, Georgia. I left Boston after 8 years, moved to Atlanta, joined a startup, which was a very interesting experience. And we had sold that company to Motorola at the time. I was managing it for them. And I just was just drawn to San Francisco. You know, if you're in
was it because of the tech, like, or because, you know, San Francisco is just known for that Silicon Valley type of feel?
Yeah, you know, if you're in technology, especially in technology leadership, you're flying out to San Francisco all the time.
Yeah.
I must have been in San Francisco once a month, twice a month. And I got tons of exposure to it, and every time I'm here, I'm having dinner with friends, and the conversation is about technology and what's happening in Google, or what Apple, what's coming out with next, what startups, what's the VC community. It's an exciting environment, and being exposed to it so much just kind of drew me to the city, and had a very uncomfortable conversation with my boss about how I was going to move to San Francisco and keep my job. He reluctantly allowed me to do that. So
Nice. So, all right. So you moved out here to San Francisco, and you were. How long were you still at Motorola from that time? From the time you moved to San Francisco?
About a year.
And that's a big deal. Just, you know, taking a step back. You were in Atlanta. You created a startup and got purchased. That's usually not the story that you hear, especially in the tech company. So let me ask you this: since you moved out here, you obviously thought it was, you know, the Silicon Valley that it is. What about the other ecosystems that are being created? You know, what's your thought on, you know, the New Yorks and the, you know, Detroit's, and even like Tony Hsieh in Las Vegas is trying to create this tech bubble ecosystem type of scenario?
You know, we've seen a lot of that for years now. I mean, back in Boston, there's always been kind of a burgeoning tech scene. I was just out in London a couple of weeks ago, launching our London office, and we were discussing this new London startup thing.
Yeah.
France has tons of investment being poured into their startup kind of incubator environment. I think the reality is, for high tech, Silicon Valley maintains this kind of place to be sort of atmosphere. There's so much investment, there's so many other companies, the ecosystem of startups, large companies, talent, engineering, all that stuff. But you know, that's not so true when it comes to media technology, when it comes to biotech, when it comes to any of these other areas. Like, you know, Boston's a hotbed of biotech. New York and LA are hotbeds of like social media and social technology. And, you know, more and more we see that kind of what people think of as tech is becoming more than one thing.
Yeah, because it's just bleeding into every industry. It has some, you know, level of technology in it.
Yeah, we talk a lot about this concept of digitization. And this idea that, you know, industries are transforming through embedding technology, the newest kind of internet technology, and that's not all going to be done in Silicon Valley. Those startups are going to be around the world. Who's going to revolutionize the like restaurant business of digitization? I'm betting on a French startup or something.
Okay, so now you've been in startups pretty much your whole career, right? So tell me a little bit about, you know, your first company. So you started your first company. Were you alone? Did you have co-founders? Were you?
I never started.
Oh, so you just joined the team of the startup.
I always joined the team. I've joined some very small startups, but you know, I think being a founder at a startup that's a unique experience. Something I hope to do one day, and I think, you know, when you come in as like employee 5 or employee 2 even, you know, I think the thing that you notice between really successful startups, really successful founding teams, is those first core set of hires. The first 5 people in the door, they are going to be the most important hires you make, you know, by an order of magnitude, because everything's going to be built on what happens in that first 24 months. And, you know, you can turn it around. I've been part of a kind of like a major pivot and turnaround, but if you can get those first few hires just right, you can really, you know, create an enormous amount of value early on. And that's sort of what I've sort of learned along the way in terms of especially early stage startups, which ones are going to be successful and which ones aren't. A lot of times that comes down to like the earliest hiring. earliest.
So what's the earliest hire you've been? Like how early in the startup have you joined?
Like 10.
Number 10. Okay. So that's really early. So in that scenario, what was like? Because we've got a lot of people who watch this are either startup founders, brand new entrepreneurs. They're looking to build their team. They're looking to have the right people. What's some of the mistakes that you saw, in that first, startup early on, being the 10th employee? What's some of the biggest things, hurdles that you said, man, we could have?
Can we talk about successes?
It's easy to talk about the success, but the hurdles are the things that people really, because when you look at entrepreneurship, most of the time, people lose not because of the successes, but because of the failures, right? They hit one roadblock and they're like, I can't get over this, and they give up. Usually happens in the first 12 months. So, what's some of the things that probably could have killed you guys if you didn't figure it out?
Yeah. So, I think there's two things. Well, I really do believe in this idea that the first few people in the door, they have an enormous swing on whether or not the company's going to be successful. Yeah. I think the other thing, especially something that happens a lot, is companies that can't say no. A lot of times as an entrepreneur, you want to grab any business success you can find.
Yeah.
And that's hugely valuable, but you don't want to start off in the wrong direction or in a direction you don't intend to take further steps.
Yeah.
And so, if you're starting a company and your long-term goal is, in one direction, but you have an opportunity to make a quick deal, a quick win, and it's,
off.
Yeah, if it's a slight deviation, great.
Yeah.
And maybe you'll learn something. Maybe you'll learn, I should have transitioned that a little bit. But if you're trying to do things that are backwards or sideways, and especially, and the company's going wrong if you're trying to do 4 of them, you can't, your team, yourself, your company, you can't do everything.
Yeah.
You have to decide, one thing that you're going to be successful at and be successful at it. And if you find out, I can't be successful at this, there's no market, my technology's wrong, I don't have the right sales, whatever it is, then change, do something else. And how many experiments can you run as a 5-10 person startup? 1 or 2.
Yeah.
You cannot run a dozen experiments.
So all right, so here's the question. If you're going to, let's say you have an idea of moving into multiple products, right? So, I have a friend, he's got a startup, and, me and him have a little bit of a debate on when you actually move into the next product, because the next product is a backfill of the first product, and it all kind of intertwines. I was saying that I think that you at least should be developing a company 24, 36 months, or maybe even 48 months on that one product before you start to move into the next one. And, he's about 13, 14 months in, and he's already looking to move to develop the next product. So what do you say to that? What do you think as far as the next product? Or does it matter? Is it like, by chance, depending on the situation? What do you think there?
If it's a evolution, right? So if I'm making razor blades, and I have the best razor blade in the world, and I start selling it, great. And my next product is the next best, an innovation on the razor blade is going to be even better than the one I have now. Yeah. When should I be working on that? Immediately. I should have that in R&D before the first one is even in the market. I want to always be building a product that is better than the product that I'm about to start selling, and never be afraid of disrupting your own business, right? But what if the next product I want to make is a coat hanger? When do I start that? Should I start that immediately? Maybe not, because can your marketing team start to create a brand that's not just for razor blades but also coat hangers? Can your sales team sell to both of the buyers, the people who are buying coat hangers and the people who are buying razor blades?
What if it's shaving cream?
Yeah, there you go. That's the gray area. and that, I think, is that really good entrepreneurs are able to make that call.
Yeah.
Right. Hey, is this product complementary enough that all of my existing sales motion and all of my existing success will carry it over?
Yeah.
Or is this product so new that I need to think of this as a completely new initiative, and I need to prepare for that? And both can work, but the second is a much larger undertaking.
Yeah, because when I look at it more on the dollars, right? So the amount of cost that it would take to develop, to get everybody, wrapped around that next product, pulling those dollars away from, especially if your dollars are limited. You've got a limited budget, that will last you to a certain amount of time. And to pull dollars away from a portion of your business that's already growing, and instead of doubling down on it, you try to open up a new product line. I think that's really where I kind of say, I don't know if that's the best move, but I guess it depends, huh?
Depends how far from your core it is. If it's a half step, if it's just a touch of shaving cream, maybe that works. Mm-hmm. Coat hangers, you're going to have to be prepared for the reality that, hey, that's almost as much of an effort as building a new startup.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the mindset around startups today. I've been around business pretty much since I was about 18 years old. So I understand. When I first started a business, it was like, if you said you were an entrepreneur, that just meant you couldn't get a job, right? And now today, you say, hey, I'm gonna start a founder. It's some esteem to that. So then you got a lot of guys who are coming out of college and they automatically think, all right, I'm gonna go be a startup founder and become successful and start the next Microsoft, the next Facebook or whatever, right? And they don't really understand that business is a little bit more trickier than just coming in and being smart and that's enough. So what do you say to that, the thinking there that is just like, I'm smart, I'm going to go start a company and I'm going to be successful, and then 12 months later they're looking and they're saying, okay, this is actually not working the way I planned, and a lot of these guys will leave.
You're a skeptic. We are in the golden age. This is the golden age of the entrepreneur founder.
But you don't think people are I would say underestimating the difficulty in starting a business? I think that businesses right now, I think that there's going to be more businesses started probably in the next 5 years than there was in the last 15, right? So I do believe that, but I think there's a little bit of naivety when it comes to new entrepreneurs today, where everybody is, because I think everybody's not an A player, right? Some people are B players or C players, and they could be great number 2s and number 3s, but everybody's trying to be an A when maybe they're not necessarily aligned to be that. And so it's interesting to see, because I hear new people starting all of the time, and it's just like a lot of the philosophies of, I'm going to start this company, I'll get funding in 6 months, my product will be on the shelves in 12 months. And I think it's like not understanding the business perspectives. Like when you look at a business, I think you have more of a, because of your experience, you've got more of an understanding of the direction of how a company, how hard it is and what you need to do and things of that nature.
It is the golden age. And in that, what I mean is, there are dramatically more companies being launched now than maybe there ever have been, but it is much easier to have a company in most sectors today than it ever has been in the past. Distribution of content is incredibly easy and ridiculously cheap. Manufacturing of goods has gotten very, very cost effective and much more accessible than it ever has before. If you want to find worldwide distribution for your product, you can place one phone call to like Amazon and have a product at least available in a marketplace. And so, are we in a time when it's easier to launch companies than it was 5 to 10 years ago? Yes. And does that mean we should have more? Yeah, I believe in that. When I go to those dinners in San Francisco with my friends from school, we talk about, is there a bubble? Are we in a startup bubble?
There's so much. Next question to ask you.
There's so much investment, so much VC investment right now. Is some of it part of the frenzy? People being overly exuberant. I think that's always true to some degree. There's always some sector somewhere that is maybe has some too much investment in it. If you ask me and you look around the world today, this idea of digitally transforming an industry with one good idea is so powerful, and I think people are overinvested in it? Maybe, but an enormous number of big wins are going to come out.
Yeah.
My only advice to founders when it comes to trying to see through the bubble, if there is one, is the number of startups that succeed is a small number. Yeah. The percentage of startups that really find success is 5% or 10%. So be prepared to fight the odds. Yeah. You're going to have to battle the odds, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, how many Ubers can there be? How many Amazons can there be? Maybe just a handful. And so you have to kind of realize that what it is going to be is hard. One reason that when I see a founding team that wants to be in a high growth business, not a lifestyle business, but a high growth business looking for an IPO or a M&A activity, 4 or 5 years down the road. One thing that comes to mind is, I don't think, sometimes you'll find a founding team and they're not ready to commit the 80 hours a week, 51 weeks a year that's going to take. Yeah. And I think that's a big difference. Like, if you want to be in a high growth startup, you're as a founder, as an entrepreneur, even as an early employee, first 20 employees, what you're talking about is an enormous amount of work because you are up against the odds. 90% of those companies fail. Be one of the 10%.
So going back to, and I agree 100%, going back to the bubble situation, do you think that the bubble is being driven by investors? Just because, and not necessarily your traditional VCs, but more of, because the opening of angel, by the time people get to VCs, a lot of these guys have already raised $1 million, $2 million, or $500,000 in angel funds. When before angels were more of like $25,000, $50,000. Now you see people, because they don't want to miss out on the next kid with a hoodie, right? They're like, hey, you got a hoodie on, you must have a great business idea, right? And they're throwing money, and a lot of people call it dumb money or whatever the case may be, but they're throwing money at a bunch of different things, hoping almost like a lottery mentality. It's like, let me throw my money here. I don't really have an understanding how any of this stuff works, but I'm just going to throw my money around. And a lot of that, I think, is at some point in time, people are going to stop throwing the money. Maybe it'll course correct, but I don't know. What's your idea on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who've had success in the industry. They and then they invest. They become early investors in startups. There's also a whole industry that's opened up on this incubation of startups, and also providing like a crowdsourced investor community. I mean, if you think people throwing money around, well, that's like mid-tier. What if you think about like Kickstarter style funding? To me, that's all good. People who can find investors that believe in them and put their money to good use. As long as people are doing that in a responsible way, they're taking money, they're putting it into R&D, they're putting it into a productive side of the economy. I think, though, the reality is a startup with a tier 1 VC behind it, a founders fund, a Sequoia, one of those guys, those are the startups that I look at working with, because, I mean, tier 1 VCs are very good at figuring out what sectors are going to be successful, what type of founding teams can work together well, all that stuff. And so the one thing I wouldn't do is I would never minimize the value of tier 1 VC investment, but you got to get a company off the ground. And I wouldn't be afraid of getting a company off the ground through some guerrilla tactics. That being said, I think, if you look at like a Y Combinator style incubator and getting something off the ground that way, I think that is a really good option.
So you're more for the whole going and bootstrapping, at least the early prove out that you actually have a business, before you go to VCs, or does it? I mean, I know it depends. Some technology, you can't build out without some VC funding. But then there's other things that you probably can go figure out how to go raise $50,000 and at least start the business, prove that the business is something of value, and then go to VCs.
You have to go get investment wherever you do get it, with something. Mm-hmm. If you are a well-known, successful entrepreneur in the industry, maybe the thing you have is just your name and your credibility and an idea, and that might be good enough. But if you're unknown, you're going to need more than that. Yeah. And that's okay, because with a really good idea and a lot of sweat equity in it, can you go out and get $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 and start building a concept that could go out and get more investment? It's possible right now, and that's great. I mean, I think that's fine. But when a lot of people make this comparison, these guys have an idea and already have 4 employees, and they have a product, and this guy, all he has is a concept and a slide deck, and how much you have today might not be the best indicator of how successful you're going to be in 4 years. Yeah. So that stuff doesn't sway me too much.
Got it. Okay. So going back to you, you in a startup transition to a larger company. Once again today, in a startup transition to a larger company. So how's that transition been? Like, what's some of the things that you learned in the midst of that transition?
Sure. Well, at Meraki, we're very lucky. We run with a ton of independence within Cisco, and I think that's the biggest way that a large company can really get their money's worth. Yeah. When you buy a startup, you might buy it for the team, you might buy it for the technology, but if you're buying a startup for the company, for the way it runs, for its operating model, you need to give it that independence in order to maintain your investment. Yeah. Cisco spent so much money buying Meraki. They've been very sensitive to the idea that keeping the machine running the way it runs is the most important part of that investment, and that's been great for us, right? We've had a lot of success over the last 3 years. It's been almost 3 years since acquisition. Kudos to the Cisco executive team for seeing that and protecting it from very early.
So now you happen to move into a very large position here at Meraki, running one of the fastest growing areas of Cisco. Obviously before you stepped into this position, you knew that this was going to be a $1 billion business. You kind of prepare for, all right, I'm about to step into, it's my job to take this to $1 billion.
Yeah. No one knows anything's going to be a $1 billion business. You might hope it's going to be a $1 billion business, but you never know it's going to be a $1 billion business. As far as transitioning into, I'm the GM of the business right now. That transition is far slower than people think. Yeah. We did a 9-month transition, so this has been pretty comprehensive.
Yeah. All right. So the last 2 questions I want to ask you is this: how do you define success? Some people say it's money. Some people say it's free time. Some people say it's building teams. Some people, everybody's got their own philosophy on what a successful life for them is. What does that look like for you?
Successful life?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought we were talking about success in business.
Success in business, you kind of mirror them together.
I don't know if I'm good at the life part.
I think a few people will probably disagree with you.
I think everyone has to define success for themselves, but I'll tell you how I define it. I define my success in terms of impact. How much impact can I have? I love coming to work every day. I think we're lucky enough to work here in San Francisco with what I believe to be the best, strongest team in the industry and one of the best places to work. But for me, that is satisfying if I believe that we're having impact,
Yeah.
right? At Meraki, what impact means is being more exposed, getting our products more exposure, changing the industry, really making simplicity kind of a primary tenet instead of a tertiary concern, and then with that, like just getting the grade A communications, internet, all of that stuff out to more people that could possibly have had it without that value proposition, without that simplicity. But impact of what your team, the impact that your team is having, and the impact that you yourself are having, to me, that is what's satisfying about my work. And I think at the end of the day, that's what will be satisfying for most people. And if I had to judge success, I think they go.
Nice. Okay. All right. So my last question. This is probably my favorite question because I'm always interested to hear the answer, response from the people I interview. So, if you were to go back in history and you can sit down and have Starbucks or whatever, a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, with anybody in history, you got 3 hours to kind of pick from them whatever you want, ask them any question that you want. They'll be 100% transparent. Who's the one person you would sit down with in history and why?
That's interesting. You mean like besides Kurt Schilling in 2004? That's I don't know. I think I would. There are so many great engineers of the day. I would like.
So an engineer would be the
I
person?
think so. Like
Wow.
like Thomas Jefferson was sort of known to be like a creator, like amazingly interesting guy. Alexander Graham Bell was a really interesting guy. Some of the early radio guys. I don't know. I'm gonna go. I'm also, to be honest, I was always very interested in American history. So it's like I am. Thomas Jefferson seems like an interesting guy. Interesting guy. Dude. He's the first person who comes to mind, I guess. I'm gonna think about that. I'm gonna think about that more. I would like to hear, what's going through like Enrico Fermi's mind over a cup of coffee, or one of these early scientists.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a good one.
I'm
going with Thomas Jefferson.
Okay.
Final answer.
Okay. Appreciate your time, and I'll hopefully get a chance to connect with the viewers later in the comment section.
Cool.
All right, buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you.